What are the top 3 best ETFs available for European investors? That is what we're going to discuss in today's episode on Nordic Finance. My name is Lucas.
And I'm Marcus. As mentioned, we will cover 3 ETFs today, and furthermore, we will use a different platform for each one, namely DEGIRO, eToro, and Trading 212, in that order.
Let's jump right in. The ticker symbol of the first ETF available to people in Europe that we recommend is VWLA or VWCE. They are similar but slightly different. Can you explain the difference?
Yeah, sure. So one of them is an accumulating ETF, and the one that Lucas just brought up on DEGIRO is a distributing ETF. The only difference between these are that one is paying out dividends and the other one is accumulating dividends. So it's actually pretty straightforward. This means that if you have this distributing that Lucas has right now, it will pay you a dividend either annually or semi-annually probably. If you have the accumulating, all the dividends that would otherwise go to you will automatically be added to your position and increase it directly, which has some tax benefits. We go more into detail about this in our other video on ETFs.
So if you own this one, you get dividends added to your account, which you can buy either more of this or then something else. But then that's going to cost you more in taxes.
Yes.
And here we have the price of it. This is what you're going to pay in euros for a full share in the ETF. But just like with index funds, you can also buy fractional shares on most brokerages. How is it with DEGIRO?
Actually, for DEGIRO, I think that mostly you have to buy a full piece. But I know, for instance, that on, I think, in eToro, you should be able to purchase fractional parts, and on Nordnet for that matter as well.
So that means that on these other brokerages, you can invest into these ETFs for as little as sometimes even €1. So let's jump into the description of what this actually is.
So if you want to find some information about it, you can click on Lucas DEGIRO, it says Asiakirjat. It might say something else if you're using the English version of the DEGIRO. So if you press that.
Yeah, right next to overview here under the price.
Here you have some fact sheets about the ETFs, and all ETFs, at least on the DEGIRO, has this fact sheets, which is actually quite handy. Okay, so here is the fact sheet for this particular ETF. Now, we're not going to go too much into how you actually use this, as we have another video on how to buy ETFs, and there we go into more detail on how this works. So this ETF is composed of large and mid-sized company stocks in developed and emerging markets, making it a great choice to hedge your bets regionally. So this means that if you choose this ETF, you will basically be exposed to the whole world, which means that if economic conditions are quite good, you probably will do quite well with this ETF. This is a great ETF if you like to play it quite safe, as it's also quite comparable to the S&P 500, as there is some overlap between these two ETFs, meaning that you will have a decent return in the long term. And the biggest risk for this ETF is generally that if economic conditions are bad, so like say a recession would probably hamper this ETF. But other than that, you should have quite decent returns.
So here we can also see the charges for this ETF. So these are the ongoing charges. This is also called the expense ratio or managing fees. It's 0.22%. And what this basically means is that as your position grows, if you invest more or if it just grows by itself, then that amount is going to grow as well. But the positive of this is that you don't have to worry about it. This gets subtracted automatically. So this is just something to be aware of, that if this is super high, for example, like coming up on 1% or even above that, then it might not be such a good investment. Okay, so here we can see the past performance in 2020, it was 16%, and we can also see 2019, 2018. So it's great to get like an overview here. And as you can see, just because it was really good one year, it doesn't mean it's good the next year.
So you would have to average this out, but the 1 year return was around 16%.
So next, we're going to jump onto eToro. And we have the ticker symbol VWLA, and that is the Vanguard S&P 500 ETF. And here again you see the price. Here you can buy fractional shares.
Yes.
Here we can see a description, but Marcus has some good information, I think, as well for us.
Yeah, but it's important to see if you compare it to the DEGIRO. This is comparable to the Asiakirjat we looked at there. In eToro instead, it's just in the description of the fund. Also to note, just as a comment, between these different brokerages is that generally I think eToro has less ETFs. It has around a little over 200, I think, but it has some of the biggest ones at least. So there is a difference between which ETFs these brokerages offers. But as to VEO, it is an ETF that tracks the S&P 500. So this is one of the biggest ETFs tracking the famous S&P 500 index. This index comprises of the biggest US companies, and it is the index of choice for at least most American investors. As the US is still the largest economy in the world, beating out China still, it is still a good investment choice for Europeans as well, as the S&P is known as a relatively safe way to invest your money and with good overall returns. The S&P 500 is also what investors call the market. So as long as the overall economy is doing quite well and we're not in a recession, you should see returns if you invest in VOO.
Okay, and here if you look at the numbers, one thing that might be good on or bad depending on what you want in your investment portfolio is that this actually pays out 1.78 dividend yield. And again, taxes on that, we have videos. I can link it in the description. Expense ratio, again, the managing fees, 0.5, a little bit higher than the previous one we looked at.
Yeah. Our final pick is a bit more riskier than the other two we have looked at so far, and we're going to use Trading 212 to look at this one.
And the ticker symbol for this one is VFEM. And this is also a Vanguard fund, but it's for emerging markets.
Yeah. Do note that it's now not in euros now, though. It's in pounds, as we are on Trading 212.
Good point. Expense ratio on this one
is sadly not mentioned, I think, but we have noted here that it's still a Vanguard fund, so it has the same expense ratio as the one we looked at on the Giro,
which is 0.22% per year.
Yes, but with that said, this ETF is obviously tracking emerging markets. So this ETF is not as safe as the others, but it might be a good way to get some exposure to these emerging markets, as these emerging markets are generally countries that have maybe higher growth than developed markets, such as the US or Europe. So emerging markets could, for instance, be China, Brazil, or India. And these countries generally, or companies from these countries and the overall economy here, generally see higher growth.
Now, we have a whole video where we discuss what ETFs are in more detail, as well as how you can invest in them. So, if that sounds interesting and something that you want to check out now that you have a few alternatives, please check it out right here. And as always, people, happy investing.
Happy investing, guys.
Does it say somewhere in percentage as well?
On our fact sheet it does. Yes, it was in the Asiakirjat.
Was it in the Asiakirjat as well?
Yes, it was.
Wait.
That's where I got it from. If you scroll down a little, there you have the past performance.
Why don't I see it?
Past performance, right on the charges. You can see there, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014.
All right, it's over here. Oh, it's all of these nice figures.
Yeah. So you have even more than the one.
Okay, I'm an idiot.